Empower HR is a Midwest-based company that provides unmatched human resources outsourcing for small to mid-sized businesses. We deliver what matters to you through authentic connections and relentless accountability. We help our clients through many employee-centric topics, including how to create an inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible workplace for all, or as we like to call it at Empower, IDEA. All right, let's get started by talking about our big idea. All right, what should you expect to take away from this short learning session today? First, we'll start with defining the culture concepts that interact with the workplace. Then we'll move into understanding the dimensions of diversity and inclusion at work. Then we'll go into diving further into the ways that we differ. And we'll wrap up by discussing your role in promoting an inclusive environment and engaging employees. All right, first we'll get started by talking about some of those culture concepts and how it might show up at work. So why talk about culture? Well, we've seen that a lack of sensitivity towards other people's backgrounds or culture generally leads to discrimination or harassment, whether that's intentional or unintentional in everyday life, as well as in the workplace. So what exactly is culture? Culture is a way of life of a group of people, the behaviors, beliefs, values, and symbols that they accept, generally without even thinking about them, as they're passed along by communication and imitation from one generation to another. Our culture acts as a roadmap for the way in which we perceive and interact with the world and those around us. You can see here on the screen that there are many components that make up who we are. While there are things that are visible that you can see when you look at somebody, like mannerisms or gestures, you can hear the language that they're speaking, you can see the clothes that they're wearing. There's also a lot of cultural characteristics that are not so visible too, like political views or socioeconomic status. So what is bias? Bias is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way that's considered to be unfair. Likely every one of us has experienced or witnessed some kind of bias in our life, and a large part of that is because many of our biases are formed subconsciously, or unconscious bias is much more common than conscious or overt bias. Unconscious bias is a cultural stereotype that includes certain individuals of groups or people or institutions that form outside of their own conscious awareness. Everybody has unconscious biases. They can sometimes be situational and can include, when you're under stress or working under pressure, that might elevate your unconscious bias, and it can lead to something called microaggressions. Microaggressions are the everyday verbal or nonverbal and environmental slights, snubs, or insults, whether they're intentional or unintentional, which create a hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely on their marginalized group membership. The difference between microaggressions and just straight up overt racism, sexism, or any of the other isms that are out there is that they are likely to be a result of unconscious bias. So you might not even realize that they're harmful, but they are. So let's talk about diversity and inclusion. Diversity just means all of the ways that we differ. It's the differences in all of those cultural components that you saw on the screen a couple of slides ago. Diversity asks, who are we going to bring into our company? Inclusion involves bringing people together and harnessing diverse backgrounds and resources in a way that's beneficial. An inclusive environment means that employees are treated fairly and respectfully, that they have equal access to opportunities and resources, and that they can fully contribute to the organization's success. Inclusion asks, how do we make people feel comfortable when they join our company? Access means that any real or sometimes perceived barriers have been removed to allow all employees to participate. So access asks, how can we open the door and make space for people? And then equity means that all people have equal opportunities to succeed at the company. Equity doesn't mean that everybody needs to be offered the same exact opportunity. It means that all employees are offered their own individualized ways to succeed. Equity asks, how can we level the playing field for all employees to grow in their own special ways? Next, we're going to talk about some of the ways in which we differ. And in this section, we aim to define important terms, as well as to discuss how to handle some of the hot button issues as they come up at work. All right, let's first talk about age. I personally really love studying historical events to see what sort of impacts they've had on each generation. However, with generational studies, we have to be careful with putting employees into boxes. While generations do share certain characteristics that have been shaped by common societal experiences, we have to look at every employee as their own individual person and not stereotype them just because of the generation that they belong to. Another way in which employees might differ is sexual orientation and gender identity. One of the keys to making sure that everybody feels included is to educate yourself by using trusted and well-researched resources on the terms and definitions within the LGBTQ community. You can also make people feel more comfortable by asking them and using their preferred pronouns. Race is not just a hot button topic. When a discussion comes up about race at work, you should be prepared to understand how your own experience, because your race and background, will shape what you bring to and take from the conversation. You should truly listen to understand and not just respond to what somebody is saying. When a person is aggrieved by racism, listeners can have a tendency to either be defensive or to try to find parallels within their own experiences, which is called conflation. You should listen to somebody's story without interjecting yourself into it. As we talk about any of the ways in which we differ, you might not ever be able to understand what it feels like to have the same experiences as that person. But when we try to understand the challenges that other people have faced, we open ourselves up to seeing the world a little bit differently. All right. Some of the other ways in which we differ. Let's talk about disability. First, when it comes to disabilities, don't make assumptions. That person is the best judge of what they can or can't do, so be sure to ask before you jump in to help. People with disabilities desire to be independent and treated with respect. You can offer assistance, but don't insist. Also, respond graciously to any request for an accommodation. An accommodation is not a complaint, it's a way to help somebody be able to do their best work. When it comes to talking about religion at work, seek to understand how religious beliefs might interact with some of your policies at work, like scheduling and helping them to celebrate religious holidays or events, how they feel comfortable dressing or grooming for the workday, and how they might need time or space during the workday for prayer. Last, political conversations are going to happen at work. The key to be respectful is that political views are closely aligned with a person's value system. So think about it. They're deeply personal sometimes. You can disagree with somebody without being totally disagreeable. And a good way to do this is just to avoid party politics at work. We also shouldn't assume that based on somebody's background or other cultural characteristics that they're aligned with a certain political belief. So why talk about IDEA at work other than it's just the right thing to do? Well, creating an environment where everybody feels included is going to lead to employee engagement. What is employee engagement? It's a term that's used for many different things at work, but they all relate to some sort of state of an employee's well-being. Employee engagement is the emotional commitment of an employee to the company and its value system. It's the strength of their mental or emotional connection and how employees feel towards their workplace or you as their manager. Employees who don't feel heard, supported, valued, empowered, or connected, they won't work as hard or they won't stick around as long as employees who do. But employees who feel like they can bring all of themselves to work, they have a willingness to put in discretionary effort and to see the company succeed. So what's the difference between satisfaction and true engagement? Well, satisfaction relates to the factors that are required for the foundation of an employment relationship. Satisfaction occurs when basic foundational elements are in place, things like compensation, safety, appropriate working conditions. Satisfaction is very transaction focused, so think about it as a bank account. As long as there's funds in that account, withdrawals and deposits can be made. Once there's an imbalance in funds, dissatisfaction on one side or the other, aka the employer or the employee, occurs. For an example, an employer might believe that they're increasing employee engagement by giving everybody a 5% pay increase. It's definitely a nice gesture and it's going to be appreciated. It's a significant deposit into the satisfaction transaction account. However, let's say that account zeroes out because an employee needs to work long hours to keep up with their work. And all additional withdrawals made by the employer is going to result in a pretty big drop in their satisfaction. Engagement, on the other hand, it differs from satisfaction because engagement involves the heart, the spirit, and the mind of the employee. They are transformationally and emotionally connected to the workplace and the values of their leaders. It drives the way that people feel at work and the conscious effort that they put in. When we feel engaged at work, we feel like all of the ways that make us unique are recognized, accepted, and treated with equity in the workplace. And we can do our best work and feel like we're contributing to something more important or even higher than ourselves. Let's wrap up today by talking about the curb cut effect. Never heard of curb cutting before? Well, here are some of the details. A group of people in Berkeley, California were tired of seeing their friends navigate the streets of the city without ramps at the corner of the intersections. So what did they do? They poured their own concrete ramps. Disability advocates then across the country started following suit, pouring these concrete ramps in other major cities. Although these people faced pressure from local authorities to stop this practice, the action of curb cutting turned into much needed infrastructure and legislation that supported individuals with disabilities and eventually helped pass something you might be familiar with called the Americans with Disabilities Act. The curb cut effect challenges the notion that when we intentionally focus our support on advancing a group of marginalized individuals, that we hurt another group of people. But after these ramps were built, people pushing strollers, workers pushing carts, they were all more easily able to use the ramp, not to mention that it's just generally less of a trip hazard for anybody to use the ramp. In fact, a study of pedestrian behavior has shown that 9 out of 10 people will go out of their way to use the curb cut when they're crossing the street, rather than stepping down from the curb. So the curb cut effect showcases that everybody benefits when we create opportunities for people to participate, contribute, thrive, and show up and be themselves at work every single day. IDEA is so much more than a concept. It's something that must live in hearts and minds at your workplace in order for it to affect how people feel when they show up to work every single day. If you need help putting IDEA strategies in place, Empower HR is here to help. If what you heard today resonates with you, check out our website, send us an email, give us a call, or check us out on social to learn more about how we can help you grow your big idea. Thanks.